Hi guys, this is Edna with Square Eye Photography. Hope you guys are all having a great day. Today I am going to give you 10 hints and tips to make your newborn digital background compositions look more natural. Hey guys, I've been there. I have a lot of photo shoots and compositions that don't look quite right, and sometimes it's really hard to just nail it. So after lots and lots of practice, I'm here to teach you kind of what I've learned. So here we go. The first thing, guys, the first hint and tip is to keep your background in mind when you are shooting. So for instance, if you're shooting a picture like this, you are going to want to shoot it in a dark background, right? So I wouldn't be shooting this with a white fur if it was going to go into a setting like this with dark fur, because here on these little edges you would get white reflection right over here. You'd get a lot of white reflection, and what makes this look fake, and what I see a lot of people doing, is they're not shooting in the appropriate background. Now, if you have a black Focati like this, oh my God, you hit the lotto. You can use this background. Everything is amazing. But we don't usually have every single background and Focati and fabric that you want to use for these digital backgrounds, right? I mean, sometimes they have really weird colors and stuff, but try to get as close as possible and try to mimic as best as you can the type of fabric. So for instance, if it's Focati, try to use Focati. If it's fabric, try to use fabric. If there's texture, try to use texture. Try to get as close as possible to your background style. So for instance, I'll show you another one. Here I used this photo right here, and I used this background. And it's Focati with fabric, and what I did was, it's a dark background. It doesn't have to be the exact color, but it just needs to be in the same range. So if it's dark, make sure it's kind of darkish. If it's light, make sure it's kind of lightish. A good thing to do is keep a color neutral like gray. You can always change gray to different colors with no problems. For instance, this fabric that I used for the baby, I used brown here. I turned it brown by grabbing all the little edges, and then, using the hue and saturation panel, or Control M for curves. You can also do that, and then add more red, remove blue, do whatever you need to do to get the color right, or you can press Control U and go to the hue and saturation panel and add more or less, change your hue and then add more or less saturation depending on your background and what looks good. So for me, I wanted to keep it like a lighter brown tone because this brown background isn't very dark. So again, it wasn't exactly the same color, but it's a neutral tone that's kind of dark. And that's what I did. Also, of course, you want to match your lighting. I mean, that's the most important thing. If you buy a background where the lighting is coming from the right side, you want to shoot your baby in the same lighting, right? Here I have my lighting coming from the right side to match this background. You obviously don't want to put a baby in with lighting that's coming from a different direction. Here, everything, you can see the shadows here on the left hand side, so the light is coming from the right side. So I light my baby up from the right side. And sometimes I haven't done that. I'll flip the lighting, so then I either flip the background if it's possible, or flip the baby. You can do either of them. And here's another sample. So here I have a pink background, really cute, really pretty, and I have a baby in a pink blanket. That's going to make it a lot easier when you have little tiny bits of light that are just sort of scattering all over the baby. You're always going to get the color of the blanket on the baby's skin as it reflects. So the closer you get to that color that you're using in your background, the easier it's going to be and the better it's going to look. So here I used pink. Now, if I really wanted to nail it, I would have also used white on the bottom and then pink in the background. It didn't have to be, again, not perfect, but it would have made it even better. So that's another thing that you need to keep in mind. Here's another one. So here I have this wreath, this beautiful wreath that has these pink flowers and this pink fabric, and I put my baby in the same scenario with a pink fabric so that it's super easy to bring your baby in and match all those colors perfectly with your baby. So here is the before and here is the after. Now I digitally put in a little headband, and I even added a little flower to the bear to kind of really bring the composition together, but that's just because I'm insane. I don't recommend that. Definitely just put your baby's headbands on beforehand. But that's again a way that I keep how I shoot in mind, right? You want to use the right color backgrounds when you bring in your baby. All right, here's another one. Here the baby. Now, here's a good example of how I didn't shoot it correctly for the background. I shot the baby first, and I always have my light on the right side. It's very difficult for me to get a light on the left side of my studio, the way I have my backgrounds kind of set up. So I shoot mostly with right side light. So for me, I couldn't switch this background and transform it and make it right horizontal. I couldn't do that, right? I can't grab this background and then edit, transform, flip horizontal so that I can put the baby in, because the letters were going to be wrong. So what I had to do was instead flip the baby horizontally. So instead of having the baby go in with the light on the right, I flipped the baby so the light's on the left. That's the way this particular background is lit. Now, normally I have my clients choose their digital background beforehand, and I make all these notes beforehand. Again, sometimes it's just not possible for me to shoot it that way, but most of the time it is. And most of the time these backgrounds are made with the light coming from the right side. But again, I want you to see that I shot with about the same color tonality on the background as was in the original image. See how it's like a light tannish brown, and again light tannish brown, so that all the little edges of the baby are in the same color tone. So please keep in mind what you're shooting so that you can match the same color with the image, right? So the second hint that I'm using is to use your own fabrics and blend them into the background. And sometimes this is possible if you have fabrics that go well with the image. So again, we're going to look at this love background. And you guys remember the last one that I brought in, right? So I'll bring up the original image so you can see what it looks like again. So this is the original image, and you see how this background right here is kind of a, I don't know, some kind of fur or nesting material. I'm not really sure. But I don't have that material, but I do have this really cute tan fabric. So I shot the baby in the tan fabric, and I just placed the whole baby and the tan fabric inside of the background. This way, you don't have to worry about where the shadows go, whether it looks natural, any of that. The fabric is already going to have the shadows in it, and it's going to look really, really nice and natural. So my suggestion is, if you can, just bring the whole, add a lot of extra fabric around the baby and bring the entire fabric into the image. I think this looks so nice. I always prefer to do this over cutting the baby out because it's really difficult. Sometimes you have like this little bit of fabric over the foot, or you have this little overlapping fabric here. You see this here? And sometimes it's just really difficult to cut a baby out of an image, out of a background, especially when they're nestled in, and try to add them in so that it looks naturally. So if you can, match your fabric to the background so that you can bring the whole thing in. And this, it wasn't a perfect match. You see how this side is like much flatter, but all I did was kind of grab it with the liquefy tool, obviously as a separate file. I just went into the original layer and went into filter, liquefy, again shift control X, and I just started moving this fabric over like this. Obviously it wasn't while it was flattened with the background, it was as a separate file. But that's all you need to do to kind of get your image to sort of mold itself around the background. So this is a really good sample of using your own fabric. And let's look at another one, guys. Here's another one. Here I love to use and buy backgrounds where I already have the fabrics, right? It's so nice when they use a white flaccata, because who doesn't have a white flaccata? Everybody has white fur, right? So it's really easy to bring a baby in and just sort of soften those edges. And look at how beautiful this baby just transitions into this fabric. It transitions beautifully into the fabric. You can't really tell where one ends and one begins. If you look really closely, the inside of the fabric's a little bit warmer than the outside, and I could definitely go in and just change that. But try to buy newborn digital backgrounds where you already have the fabric, so that when you shoot it, it blends right in. Here's another one. Here on this newborn facts one, what I did was I shot it with white fur, and then I softly blended the white fur in to this fabric that they had. And you can't really tell, but there's about a 50% opacity mask around this fabric, so that these shadows are actually the original shadows in the image. Some of them are where there's not a lot of shadow. I don't mind if I go right up to the baby if there's not a lot of shadows. But here you can see, I'm going to come in really close. This right here is the fur, and this right here is the fabric, so that you can see all these little baby hairs. And again, it's with a really soft brush that I'm doing this. And see, here is the fur, and here is the fabric. But it's really hard to see because it's blended so well. So that's another way to do it. Almost the same fabric, not quite the same fabric, but almost. And here's another one. So this one I used entirely my fabric. So let me show you the other one again. This is the original. On the outside of this fabric, this is the original fabric that came on the background. But I used my fabric instead completely. So here you can see that the edges are barely the other fabric. See all these little edges right here? Barely, barely, barely. Just right here you can see that there's the edges of the other background. And I barely softened them in a little bit. But this entire white fur is my background. So just so much easier, because look, it already comes with the shadows of the baby and how the baby is really molded into it, and all these little tiny pieces of fur are already on there. So it makes everything so much easier when the fabric is already in, when you add it already into your background. And here's another one. So the original of this one did not come with, I'll open up the original for you guys so you can see. So the original of this fabric did not come with white fur like this. It came, I added my white fur just like this. So here's the other original background. Oops, sorry guys. This one right here. You see that background? This is the original background, and it's beautiful and all, but it's much, much easier when you add your own background and you don't have to worry about all these little pieces of fur and feather and where to add the shadow and how to do it. And I'm going to teach you guys how I make this look so natural. You see all this fur that's spilling out? I'm going to give you guys hints and tips on how to do that coming up right now so that it blends in really, really naturally. Again, light coming in the right direction. I'm sure I had to flip this baby, right? Because the light is on the left-hand side and I have this humongous 5-foot softbox that I use, and it just doesn't fit in my shoot space on the left very well. So I'm sure I flipped the baby over and I added him into this background, but it looks completely natural because I didn't have to blend their fabric into my baby, right? This is my fabric, and all I had to do was blend the fabric into the background, the fabric and the baby into the background. So that's another hint and tip there. And now the next hint and tip is to use a mask. Guys, I will absolutely have a heart attack if you're erasing. You have to use masks. Absolutely, you have to use a mask anytime that you're using a newborn digital background. If you guys don't know how to use masks, you need to go to YouTube right now and learn how to use masks correctly. I'm sure most of you are, but I'm going to die if any of you are not using a mask. So here, you see, here are my masks on this side. And the background, right? Here is the original background, right? And when you add your layer with your baby in it, you have to add a mask, right? Here's the mask. When you add a mask, and this is how you add a mask, this is the adding mask area. So you bring in your baby already masked. Okay, so let me show you really quickly how to do that, because I don't know if most of you know how to do that. I'm going to undo these right here, and I'm going to show you guys how to do that. This is the original baby that I brought in, right? This baby. Just like that. Now I'm going to show you how I do this. Normally I have these out of my screen, so I'm going to pull this out. We're going to go right here to the selection tool, the quick selection tool. I like to use the quick selection tool, and the hotkey is W. So you can just press W, and we're going to go back to the baby. And I'm just going to grab the outside of the baby, just like all this, just like this, as close as you can come to grabbing the baby. Okay, all the inside of the baby. And it's on plus. I don't know if you guys noticed. Do you see the plus right there? You want to make sure that you have plus selected. Okay, you can also go minus if you want to like remove right here where I have this blue removed. You can use minus, or you can just press Alt. Alt removes. Watch this. Alt. See how it turned into a minus? It removes. You don't want any of that blue, so. And then plus, which is shift, adds. So if you're ever in a situation where you're just, if you would just want the normal selection tool, you can press shift for plus and alt for minus. Shift for plus, alt for minus. And you hold them down. So I'm minusing all of this stuff right here on the edges. And now at this point, where I have the baby pretty selected, let me take that off. I am going to select refine edge. And I've taught this in my other videos, guys, with my other newborn digital background videos. I suggest you go and check those out because they're really in depth on how to actually do this step. Refine edge. You can go to smart radius and kind of play with this to see how those edges are already looking. Look at that. So I went to 0 here, and now look. It's going to check to see what looks best. I like that there. You can smooth a little bit. I always like to feather my edge at least a 1, depending on your background. I don't like to go way over 1, but you can do 1, 1.5. If your background's really, really blurry, then you can go to 4 or 5, but that's something that you need to learn to play with. Add a tad of contrast, and I always shift my edge, guys. I always shift my edge. Now watch this. I add 100. Look at all the blue on the edges here. Do you guys see that? Look at this. Do you see all the blue here on this edge? Now if I shift the edge over, watch that. You see how that starts to disappear? Watch. That is a hint and tip that will save your life constantly. So now that I'm done with this portion, I'm going to press down here to the output 2, and I'm going to click on new layer with mask. Okay, and I'm going to press OK. Now you can bring in the baby into the background, right? So now you scoot this one over and you bring the baby in with the mask, right? I'm going to close this one because I don't need it right now, because I would normally save that. And you're going to press Control T, and you can go in and right here lower your opacity so you can see the baby and the background. Right here when you have that layer clicked on. And I'm going to press Shift. Always hold the Shift down and start bringing in that corner. Any corner. You can do any corner. There we go. Until you think the baby looks right. Right, and I think I'm going to bring them over just like this. There we go. I'm going to press Enter. Now I'm going to bring the opacity up. Now I want you to keep something in mind. A lot of times when you bring in something like this, you're going to have these little edges. Can you guys see that? I'm going to zoom in here for you. You see these edges? You have to get rid of those edges. So you go here to your mask, not the baby, but the actual mask, and you're going to paint brush it out. So you're going to grab a brush, and I'm going to go just for a nice soft brush, and I'm going to do opacity 100, and we're going to brush out that background, guys. So you always want to go with the opposite color. Obviously, we want to do this. This selection is in black, so you want to do white. So you're going to press X, or you can click here and it brings back the correct colors. Right here on this little corner, like let's say you're on red or some other color, I don't know, whatever you want to, whatever color you want to be on. If you click here, it brings the regular white and black back in. Okay, so you can press X on your keyboard to toggle between those. And now with the black, carefully at 100% opacity, we're removing that little line that's all around. Now we can focus on cleaning up the edges also. So any place where I have like a little bit of blue or anything, I can remove any of that. I shouldn't have used a blue background. See, I'm always learning also. I should have had a brown or neutral background underneath, but I probably had the baby on blue and wanted to make it a little bit easier for me. So there you go. Just like that. So here, in order to liquefy those edges, what you want to do is, I'll make a copy of this so you can go back to it. Once you're done cleaning up everything, you're going to convert to Smart Object, and this will allow you to then go in and Shift Control X, liquefy. Okay, now here in the liquefy panel, you can show your backdrop right here, and you can stretch the background to cover the background underneath, right, like that. And you can even take right here in the freeze mask tool and freeze the baby so that the baby doesn't get touched by the liquefying. So freeze the baby right there. Now you can make your brush bigger, and you and you can really go in and play with that. And see how I'm not worried about the baby because it's not touching the baby. All right, guys. So here, that's what you can do. You can show the backdrop. You don't have to show the mask if you don't want to. You can remove that. You can freeze the baby and press OK. And there you go. That already made a huge difference. Again, I'm doing this really quickly. I normally would not do this quickly, but that's how you would do that. So that's how you use a layer mask, guys. So now you have the layer mask, and you can always tweak it and change it and all of that. So I'm going to close out of here, and we'll go to our next hint and tip. So here, the next one is to use special brushes. I'm going to show you, remember I showed you that white fabric, and I told you that this is how I brought in all of these little pieces right here. Okay, so here under brush presets, I have a collection of hair brushes. So these are all of the brushes that these are super old. I bet there's way better brushes, like nature and natural brushes. You can just append them. And hair brushes. Where are my hair brushes? Hair brushes. There's a pack there. Here's another pack over here. And there we go. You see this right here? I'm going to zoom in for you guys. You see all these hair brushes right here? So this brush right here, a brush like this, you see that? Is going to be perfect for when you have your layer mask, right? Because I have a layer mask all around here, and you want to start pushing all of that so that it looks like fur, right? So like removing all of that background so it looks like fur. Now, here's something a lot of people don't know. Let me open this up a little bit better. Right here, watch my brush. See my brush right here? You can move around your brush, see? With these this little round, I don't even know what the hell that is, but whatever it is, you can move around your brush. So here, if I have my brush like this, then I can go to this side, right? Let me move it, tweak it just a little bit. There you go. Boom, 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 boom. All I have to do is just click on that layer mask and make it fur. Let me bring in the other background so you can see what I mean on the using the mask area. I'm just going to show you what I mean by this really quickly here. Let's see if I have it on here. All right. Here we go. So if I were to want to use this brush, look at this fur. Now, obviously, I wouldn't do it on this fur because this is around kind of like what I did for this fur is I just brought in a brush and literally brought in all these little sections right here. But if it was a fur, then I would do this. You see that? And I would do a different brush. Let's try this one right here. And I would angle it again. See that? So sometimes when you have fur and you want to bring in, like right here, right? Like you would have little pieces of fur coming in. Again, I wouldn't use it on this background, but I use it on a lot of other backgrounds. And I will flip them and I'll do all kinds of crazy things to these. See, that one will flip. There we go. So you can give it a different texture. And this really helps kind of bring everything together, guys. Give it the right texture that it needs. And you can see down here how it's telling you that what it's doing. Look at that. Isn't that gorgeous? Makes a big difference, guys. That makes a huge difference. All of a sudden, this baby doesn't look placed in here, right? Look at that. That's what I'm talking about. And you can download those brushes free all over the internet. Deviant art websites. There's all different places that you can get these brushes. And there's so many. It's fun, guys. If you get into brushes, you're going to see that there's so many. There's awesome skin brushes for retouching skin. There's hair brushes. There's like literally you can give somebody a ponytail. There's makeup brushes. If you get into that world, get into YouTube and start looking up tutorials on brushes and what to do with brushes, you're going to see there's an amazing world of different brushes. These are just a couple that I downloaded, and I'm just making do with these, but I could really go in and I bet I could find a flaccata brush just like this and just use little round ways. Like I probably have something in here that would really mimic that. Look at this brush. It's round, right? Let's rotate it. So if I wanted to make this a little bit smaller and bring in like a little round, piece, like you got to be careful how you're using it, but like here, right? You could totally do that. And it looks really good. All right, guys. So that is the brush hint and tip. It's the one thing I think that I use now a lot, especially when I'm using something with textures, like all of this area I used all of this area here, right here. See all of this? Like all of that is brushes. And then I would angle them the right way. So here I angled them down kind of diagonally this way. Here I angled them horizontally. Here I angled them vertically. I added them all these different ways. Here again, horizontally. So play with that, guys. Download some free brushes. They're all over the internet. All right. Number 5 is darken the baby and don't forget about your shadows. So here I have a baby that is in this background, and the original baby is much, much lighter, but I had to darken the baby to fit the environment, right? And I also had to darken all of these areas. So I darkened all of the little butt, all the little leg, and a lot of times I'll just go in and I'll grab a section of baby with the lasso tool like this. That is not the lasso tool. Right there. And I'll grab a little chunk like this and I'll just feather it like Shift F6. I'll feather it like maybe 5 and then I'll darken it. Again, this is with the background. Obviously, I would do this with just the baby, not the background. Right? And oh, if you didn't like that, let's try 20. Let's Shift F6 20. So adding shadows really helps make this more realistic, right? Again, if you're doing this just on the baby and not on the background, it looks amazing. You don't want to do this afterwards. You want to do this while the mask is still on and you've created a layer that's separate, right? So when you have your little layer mask and you create a smart object, this is the time to go in and just start adding your shadows. Like, let's say I want a little shadow right here, right? All this area. You see how much depth that adds to the image? I'm going to show you the before and after. See how much depth it adds? And that's just by adding some shadows. Now, of course, and I'm sure all of you guys know, that this original background didn't come with the shadows here. I added all of these shadows. And the thing about shadows is you have to be careful. When something is very close to your baby, it's going to have a much shorter shadow. If something is just sort of a broad shadow, like this part of the baby is shading this whole area, it's a softer shadow. The closer you get to the baby, the darker the shadow, right? There's several different layers of shadows here, guys. There's a shadow that's just sort of in this general area that's darkened by the baby being lit this way, and then there's a deeper shadow right around here by the leg, and then there's a very deep dark shadow right around here where it would naturally be really dark, right? So be aware of your shadows. Know where they're coming from. One shadow just cast across the baby isn't enough. You have to have depth in your shadows, right? Look at how dark this area is with the baby. That's how dark you need to have these areas, right? So here, you'd go even darker. And it's a small area, so let's go to 3. And you can darken that shadow a lot darker. You add a lot more realism when your shadows are really in tune with the rest of the image. See how much of a difference that made just right there? There's a normal shadow, and then there's a deeper shadow. And I'll show you guys the original. Give me one sec here. All right, here we go. This is the original. I literally flipped it again because this one doesn't have lettering, so I can flip it. So edit, transform, flip horizontal. So I flipped it horizontally. There's my baby. And none of this has the actual shadows with the baby in it. None of it. All of these shadows were added afterwards. So be aware of your shadows. Be aware that shadows that are closer to the baby are darker. Again, farther away from the baby are softer. You should have about 2 or 3 different layers of shadowing just for the background, not including the baby, just for the background. And then if you need to add shadows for the baby, then add extra shadows, because a dark background like this with like wood in the back should have a lot more shadows on the baby than, you know, a lighter background that's going to reflect a lot of light on the baby. I'm doing a whole bunch of hand gestures that you guys can't even see. But be aware of your shadows. And on to the next tip, guys. All right. So the next thing is color for your environment. So here is this baby right here, right? And the shout out to Amy, who just bought a version of this digital background from my Etsy store. So I don't know if any of you guys know that I sell digital backgrounds also. Not a ton. I'm not a huge seller, but whenever I have something new, I also like to make newborn digital backgrounds for my own use, because I own this set, right? I own this little lace basket. But a lot of times a baby is not going to go on a prop. And if a person that's already seen my work wants this, then I can put them in digitally. So a lot of times this is what will happen. I'll have a baby that comes in and I'll shoot them in a light natural, like let's say it's not cream, but it's white. And the baby is colored like this and it doesn't match the background. A lot of times you're like, well, that's a good, clean color. But it doesn't match the background. You have to take that baby, the image of the baby here, click on the baby and press Control M and try to match how the baby would look in that background. So we're going to remove some blue and look at that. Already the baby matches the background, right? And you can play with it. Like, feel free to just kind of play with it and see what is going to look right. Check with, you know, check Play with the green, the red, the blue. That's how you learn, guys. So I think that that looks perfect right there. This is the original one that I added. But look at that. Doesn't that look beautiful? And it looks a lot better than how it looked, how blue and how bright the image looked before. So match your color tone to your background. I'm going to close this one up and bring in another one. Here is another one, and this one I did a little bit later in time, and now again the same thing. It's a warm toned brownish image, and here, guys, I want to show you that I added my background. So I added an additional background to this. Remember, the other one didn't have this white, but I shot the baby in white, and I just sort of added another layer of fabric to this background so that I didn't have to worry about all these little tiny pieces of fabric and flaccati. So I had to make this baby substantially warmer than it was so that it matched the background. All right, guys, next one is blur the baby or the background to match your image. All right, so here is this beautiful image of a baby in the hat. We couldn't put the baby in this army helmet because honestly the baby was just not going to fit in correctly. So I shot the baby separately, and I shot the guy and the baby, and I needed to fit them in together. Let me bring you the PSD layered file so you can see the difference. So the original image was like this, and I shot it at a particular f-stop, and I shot the baby at a particular f-stop, that exact f-stop too. But because this was a closer image and this was a slightly farther away image, I didn't get the same amount of blurring. It got way more blurry with the baby than with the backdrop. So what I had to do was I had to blur out more of the background. So you see this little microphone thing? I had to make another layer and blur it out because it would have looked really weird for the baby's butt to be blurry and that microphone to be bright. You see that? Or sharp. So I had to blur out, and when I mask to blur, I mask very, like, this would not be a strong line. Like here it's a much stronger line when I masked it, and here it's a much softer line when I mask it. So I had to blur the background even more, and there's been times where I'm in a background that is it's much more blurrier. Like let's say the blurriness will start right here, and I have to blur the baby instead of the background. And if you're in a situation where, you know, you have a baby that's really sharp all the way through and a background that's really blurry, then again, blur the baby. So it can be done any which way, but you have to be aware of your surroundings and where you're putting the baby in. Right here, this little arm may not have been as blurry, but I needed it to match this background, right? So go through and add blurriness in your background where you need it. And it just adds another layer of realism to that image instead of it looking odd, like why is this sharp back here and the baby's blurry, right? That wouldn't make any sense. So closing those up so you guys can see that example. All right. The next thing is keep in mind contrast. When you're shooting in a darker background, you're going to have more contrast on the baby than when you're shooting in a lighter background. Obviously, when you go from light to dark and the dark is very dark, that's literally the definition of contrast. So when you are shooting a baby and you have the dark background already down, right? Like this baby that I shot in gray, remember from the original image, then I don't have to worry much about adding more additional contrast. But if this was shot in a little bit lighter background, I may have to add more contrast to a baby that's being put into a darker background. And here, if she was shot in a little bit more neutral background, I'd have to remove contrast from this image. I shot her in a light background, so I didn't have to worry much about the contrast. But keep that in mind. darker backgrounds need more contrast. Lighter backgrounds, the baby would need less contrast. All right. Number 9, relax and practice, guys. Hey, when I first started doing these, mine didn't look very real. You know, some of them looked a little less ideal, right? I didn't really think about cooling this baby off and removing more red, and the light didn't look quite right, and I didn't shoot it in a fur background so you can see little pieces of fur, and the fur here is really too sharp, and so it's okay. It doesn't look horrific, but you know, I definitely would do things a little bit differently now. Same thing here. I went through and this baby just doesn't look quite right. Like not 100% perfect for me. Like it needed something else. I don't know what it is, but as I start doing more, I learn more. This one, the baby looked like he's just a quarter of an inch in the fur instead of having a bigger shadow and making the baby look like he was deeper in that fur, right? So just relax and practice, and over time you're going to get better. Don't be frustrated. As a matter of fact, I just posted a before and after of my newborn photography, and I'm going to show you guys that right now. My newborn photography from 2006, the first time I shot a baby, to 2018, and it was night and day difference, guys. All right, guys, so I just posted this on my Instagram story. Never give up, because great things take time. This was my first newborn shoot in 2009. Check that out. Super red, really yellow, backwards lighting, and these are 2018. And I'm still not where I want to be. And I've been doing this for a long time. And I thought about giving up newborn photography on a daily basis for the last few years, but I didn't. I immersed myself in it and I got more into it, and now it's really starting to show. And it just takes time. Don't beat yourself up. Take time. But also, no matter what you do and how you're doing it, ask friends and family that are honest to give you feedback so that you don't think and get stuck that you're doing everything perfectly and wonderfully when you may not be. So ask a real friend. Like, I'm glad that I have Josh here next to me, because he would tell me straight out, oh my God, that looks horrible. And that's a person you want to go to, not somebody that's going to tell you, oh, that's so pretty, and everything you do is so pretty. Because you don't want friends that are going to be dishonest with you. You want people that are going to be brutally honest with you, telling you whether something looks real or it doesn't. Hey, you can always email me an image and I'll be brutally honest with you. Absolutely, guys. So look at my contact information below. And if you want a critique of your work, I'll be brutally honest with you. All right. But again, just relax and practice. It's all about practice. It's all about practice. But with these hints and tips, they should help you elevate a little bit more. All right. The last thing is end with a universal tone. Remember when I said, I don't know, there's something about this, I'm not 100% sure what it is. I love it, but it could look better. If you put a universal tone on top of this, or some action, some pretty pastel something, and you do it on top of the layer mask and the background, it's going to look a lot better. I use a lot of Rad Lab. So this is how I end everything. I give it a little universal tone. So normally it's not like it's not going to be something like this. I normally do something really clean and really pretty, but it's always at the absolute end. But if you do put like a pretty tone on top of it, then it will all look like it's shot together, right? So here, let's do an antique tone. Maybe Luxe Soft. Oh, I love Luxe Soft. Let's soften that up a little bit. Oh, I love Butter Pecan. Vanilla Kiss is gorgeous. Look at that. So all of a sudden this went from just, okay, yeah, it looks good, to like, wow, that you really shot the baby like that. Even though there's still little imperfections in it, it just looks a little bit more real, like you really shot the whole thing together, and it looks a little bit more natural. anytime you're doing masking of anything and you're bringing in something from somewhere else into an image, when you add a universal tone to it and you add like an action or something, a filter, it's just going to look a ton better. And I don't always do this. I will use at the end, I'll add, you know, a warmth to it, or I'll add a contrast that's universal, but I don't always add filters to my work. I like my work to look really clean because I've been in business for 25 years, guys, and there's nothing worse than looking back at your work and being like, oh my God, I used to use that oh God, I used to do spot color. Look at those red roses with that black and white background. That's so passé. And so I used to be a heavy filter user in Photoshop. I did grunge looks. I mean, literally, I have hundreds and hundreds of wedding albums with a whole grunge look on it. And it's not timeless and classic. So I would definitely keep things really classic. Maybe I'll do one thing like this with a vanilla kiss, like one of the images. But most of the time, my universal tone is going to be like a light on, you know, with a little bit of contrast. I like Sugar Rush. Again, this is just like a vibrancy thing, right? So those are the things that I would do to an image more than a full universal tone. But if you really are having a problem with something not looking quite right, try a whole universal tone over it. I think that'll make a big difference. All right, guys, that is the end of the 10 hints and tips. If there's anything that you guys want to hear or know more about, leave it on the comments below. As a matter of fact, comment anything, because when you comment, what happens is the more that people comment, the more that YouTube shows that there's interactions going on, and it'll actually push this video so it's viewed more often in searches. So comment, even, hey, thanks a lot, or have a great day, or I hated your video, I loved your video. Literally, my YouTube channel started blowing up a little bit more because I had a hater who was like, stupid video, and everyone kept commenting like, you're so mean, you're so rude, and all of a sudden I had 20,000 views on a video. That was my first video that really took off, was because someone was like, stupid video. So comment. I'd love to hear what you guys want to know more about. I've been doing this for 25 years, guys. I'm an extensively published award-winning photographer. If there's anything that you guys want to know, let me know. I'm happy to help. I am planning at some point doing some, you know, real tutorials with like hands-on photos and photography so that you guys can see what I use, how I do it, what I do. I'll be doing another newborn how to shoot so it looks like window light YouTube tutorial also soon. I am getting together with some people to help me do that. But anyways, you guys, please choose happiness. Choose happiness every day. It is a choice. Love you guys. Thank you so much for watching these videos. Please subscribe and like and check on your notifications when I have videos coming up. That way you know about them. And again, you guys have a blessed day. Thanks a lot.